Hello there, welcome to another episode of the True Gamer Top 10, and today we're going to take a look at the top 10 worst PS2 games of all time. That's right, the PlayStation 2 console. What were the top 10 worst, most awful games? Number 1. The Getaway came out in 2002. One of the most disappointing games in history. The Getaway was an ambitious third-person shooter sandbox-style PS2 exclusive. Starting with its problematic development, which delayed release for over 2 years, The Getaway featured a convoluted storyline, confusing vehicular controls, and lack of depth in the actual gameplay. Instead of bringing a unique experience, this was your typical GTA clone that were so common in the early 2000s. Number 2. Madden NFL 2005 came out in 2004. By the early mid-2000s, the Madden NFL series was known for being a copy-and-paste franchise, constantly rehashing gameplay year after year after year with minimal new features. Madden 2005 had a crappy soundtrack, unrealistic graphics, and extremely easy AI. If you wanted a better football experience on the PS2, then ESPN NFL 2K5 was way superior and only cost around $20 at launch. Number 3. Kingdom Hearts came out in 2002. An incredibly boring action RPG, Kingdom Hearts felt like a cheap gimmick between JRPG publisher Square and children's cartoon company Disney. The art style was garbage, the voice acting sucked, and the orchestral soundtrack is annoying at best. The worst part about the game is the simplistic and tedious gameplay, which isn't fun and felt more like a big waste of time. Number 4. WWE Smackdown Here Comes the Pain came out in 2003. While pro wrestling in the WWE was still somewhat popular during the ruthless aggression era of the early 2000s, the games took a huge nosedive with Here Comes the Pain. A very limited roster that featured very few legends, slow gameplay, lackluster modes, and the weakest wrestler of all time, Brock Lesnar, on the cover. Many of the best wrestlers are also missing, including Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan, Dean Ambrose, and Roman Reigns. Number 5. Dragon Quest VII Journey of the Cursed King came out in 2004. One of the crappiest games in JRPG history. This is your typical grindfest tedious experience from Square Enix. The cel-shading art style is so played out by the mid-2000s, and then you got the storyline, which is a complete borefest. The saving system is far too limited, and the gameplay feels so outdated that it's basically just an early 90s JRPG with 3D graphics. Number 6. Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, came out in 2001. By the early 2000s, platform games have become tired and out of style. The first Jak and Daxter is no exception, featuring the same typical jumping around, exploration gameplay of many platform games we've seen a million times in the past. Horrible camera angles, not enough boss fights, way too much slowdowns during the action, and the frustrating load times kills the entire experience. Number 7. Final Fantasy X came out in 2001. When it comes to overhyped franchises, Final Fantasy was one of the worst offenders in gaming history. Yes, FF10 featured impressive graphics and slick-looking cutscenes, but that's about the only positive things that you can say. The gameplay is tedious and lacking innovation, the dialogue is horrendous, the mini-games in the puzzle segments were completely pointless, and the linear presentation is uninspired. Number 8. Shadow of the Colossus came out in 2005. I can appreciate Team Ico's effort and Sony's desire to crank out more original games like Shadow of the Colossus, but this was a complete failure. The massive world of the Forbidden Land, which you have to explore, is completely empty and lifeless, with no other characters to interact with, excluding your horse Agro and the Colossus boss fights themselves. The soundtrack is annoying and obnoxious, the controls feel clumsy and unresponsive, and the frame rate gets so freaking choppy and annoying during the actual Colossus battles. Number 9. Sly 2 Band of Thieves came out in 2004. One of the worst sequels in the PS2 era, Band of Thieves featured a bunch of third-rate anthropomorphic animals that steals items. The game is obviously a bad example for kids, teaching young children that it's okay to steal and promotes thievery. The worst part of Sly 2 is that it continues promoting the disgusting furry movement, showing sexualized female characters like Carmelita Fox as some sort of sick fetish for all these pathetic, basement-dwelling nerds with no girlfriends. Number 10. God of War came out in 2005. When it comes to originality, Sony is completely bankrupt of having any. The original God of War from 2005 is nothing but a cheap clone of older games such as Rygar and Devil May Cry, from its health bar system, level structure, saving system, and the giant boss fights. There's nothing new to see here. Kratos is one of the lamest characters in history because his story and the entire ancient Greek background has been overused time and time again. Alright, so that's it. That's the top 10 worst PS2 games of all time. And take it from me, the true gamer. Basically, this is what a true gamer's top 10 PS2 worst games list looks like. These are definitely the most pathetic titles. No wonder the PS2 completely lost the 6th generation console wars. It was the weakest system, it offered the crappiest graphics, and as you can see in this top 10 worst games, it had the most terrible top 10 exclusives, and some of them not exclusives, but also third-party games as well. They were just completely bad and crappy on the PlayStation 2 system. And for the record, the Nintendo GameCube was way better than frickin' PS2. Yup, the PS2 completely stunk. The True Gamer Top 10 is created, performed, and produced by the TheReviewSpace channel. Please check him out on youtube.com/TheReviewSpace. Thank you. Until next time.